This is Say Cheese and Die Screaming, which is book 8 in the Goosebumps HorrorLand series by R.L. Stine, chapter 14. I stuck my hand in front of the lens. David lowered the camera. "Why did you do that?" he cried. "What's your problem, Julie?" I didn't answer. I stomped toward him and made him back up in the aisle. "What are you doing with that camera?" I demanded. David shrugged. "What's the big deal? My dad let me borrow it. He said you didn't want it anymore." But, I sputtered. "I know you tried to get rid of it," David said. "Huh?" My breath caught in my throat. "How do you know that?" He shrugged again. "I watched you," he said softly. A strange smile spread over his face. "I followed you, Julie." "You what?" I cried. "Who do you think was spying on you?" David said, still grinning. "I stayed up day and night, and I watched you leave it in that little house, and I watched you toss it in the pond. Who do you think returned it to you both times?" My mouth hung open. "How did you get it from the bottom of the pond?" I asked. "I reached in and pulled it out," David laughed. "That pond is only a foot deep." I just stared at him. I couldn't speak. "You sneaked into my house? You returned it? You spied on me? But why?" I cried. "Just to mess with your mind," David replied. "I really want to win our contest, Julie. I wanted to get you totally stressed so I could win it easily." I gave a bitter laugh. "Well, you got me totally stressed, David," I said. "Good work, dude." And then I added, "But I'm still going to win the contest." He started to say something, but Becca interrupted from the stage. "David, take our picture for the yearbook." Becca and Greta both started waving David to the stage. I stepped in front of David and raised my digital camera. "I'll do it," I said. "I was here first." "But we don't want you to snap us," Greta said nastily. "Yeah, Juju. You don't know how to snap bubble gum," Becca exclaimed. They both laughed and slapped high fives, like that was some kind of hilarious joke. "Go away, Juju," Greta said. "David has the cool camera." I turned to David. "Don't use that camera," I said. "I'm warning you." He laughed. "Warning me?" "I had a good reason to get rid of it," I said. "David, listen." But he raised the camera in both hands and aimed it at the two girls. "No!" I dove forward, tried to grab it away from him. Too late. The camera flashed. The film slid out. "An instant classic," David cried. He handed the picture up to Becca. She and Greta leaned over it, watching it develop. They had smiles on their faces, but the smiles quickly faded. "Oh, gross," Becca cried. Greta groaned too. "Oh, that's totally sick." Chapter 15. The two girls squinted at the photo. "What's wrong with your camera, Juju?" Becca asked. "The color is all messed up." "Huh? My camera?" I cried. "David was the one—" "Your camera stinks," Greta said. "Like you, Juju." "Why are you blaming me?" I said. "I didn't—" But Becca shoved the picture into my face. David and I stared at it. In the snapshot, both girls had green faces and arms, and their skin was all cracked and spotted, like alligator skin. I gasped. Was that going to happen to Becca and Greta? Were they both going to get green alligator skin in a few minutes? A shudder shook my body. I nearly lost my lunch. David had snapped the picture, but the two girls blamed me. They blamed my camera, not David. If the picture came true, I shuddered again. I knew I had to get help, but who could help me? Mom and Dad would never believe a wild story like this. I grabbed the camera from David and I ran up the aisle to the exit. I could hear the two girls making jokes about my camera. Then suddenly the jokes stopped. I reached the auditorium doors. I started to push one open, and I heard two shrill screams of horror from the stage. I didn't have to turn around. I knew what I would see. My knees felt weak. I grabbed the door handle to hold myself up. Another shudder ran down my body. I turned slowly and saw Becca and Greta screaming and tugging at their faces. Even from the back of the auditorium, I could see their dry green skin, all cracked and lined up lumpy. I swallowed hard. I forced myself to breathe. Becca shook a fist at me. "You did this to us," she shrieked. "You're a witch." "Why do you hate us so much?" Greta wailed. Mrs. Harper jumped up from the piano. She stared at me sternly with her hands at her waist. Everyone in the auditorium was staring at me. Becca and Greta screamed and cried, tugging the green skin on their cheeks. "We know what you did to Rena," Greta cried. "We'll sue your family," Becca shouted. "We'll have you arrested. The whole school will know you're a witch." I could only stammer. No words would come out. My panic quickly turned to anger. This camera was ruining my life. I swung it high and smashed it against the back wall. Smashed it hard. Smashed it again and again. Gasping for air, my arms aching, I raised the camera to examine it. It wasn't hurt at all, not even a tiny dent. I opened my mouth in a scream of rage, pushed the door open, and ran from the auditorium. I was halfway to the front exit when my cell phone rang. I fumbled in my bag and pulled it out. Mom. Hi, Julie. I just wondered if... Mom, I'm so glad you called, I said in a trembling voice. You've got to listen to me. I don't know what to do. I leaned against the wall and pressed the phone to my ear. I told her the whole story. I started with Rena, then I told her about Carla and her arm. I told her everything. Mom listened without making a sound. I ended by telling her what just happened to Becca and Greta and how they blamed me and called me a witch. Wow, Mom muttered in a low voice. Wow. What can I do, Mom? I cried. You've got to help me. Julie, Mom said, I know exactly what you have to do. Chapter 16. I gasped. Huh? You do? Tell me. Type it up, print it out, and give it to your creative writing teacher, Mom said. It's an excellent story. Very clever, really. My mouth dropped open. No, Mom, you got it wrong. Listen to me. I like the supernatural part, Mom said. Of course, your dad likes that sci-fi stuff more than me. But I've always said you have a great imagination. I think you take after your Aunt Jenny. I gritted my teeth. I tried not to explode into a million pieces. It's not a story, I said slowly. What did you say? Mom replied. My phone is beeping. I'm getting another call. I'm still at work. Dinner may be a little late. Bye, dear. She clicked off. I heard voices. 3 cheerleaders in their red and gold uniforms came skipping past me. They practiced a cheer as they moved down the hall. They seemed so happy. I slumped against the wall and watched them till they turned into the next hallway. I never felt more frightened. I'd lost my best friend. I'd injured poor Carla, who was still in the hospital, and Becca and Greta were going to turn the whole school against me. Everyone would soon believe I was a witch. A sob escaped my throat. I bit my lip. I didn't want to cry. I shoved open the doors and ran outside into a cool gray afternoon. A few raindrops were in the wind. I didn't care about the weather. I didn't care about anything but getting rid of the evil camera. I ran all the way home. I didn't stop at corners. I didn't look for oncoming cars. Houses and yards and streets passed by me in a gray blur, like an out-of-focus photo. I pulled open the front door and heard a cry. Julie! Sammy ran up to greet me. His face was pale. His eyes were big and frightened. Help me, he cried. There's a bee in the house. It's going to sting me. Sammy was stung on the nose when he was 3. He's been terrified of bees ever since. He grabbed my hands and squeezed them. Kill it! Kill it! Sammy, are you home all by yourself? I asked. Mrs. Kellens was here, but she had to run back to her house for a few minutes. I heard a loud buzz. Sammy wasn't making it up. A fat yellow bumblebee swooped low over his head. He screamed, Kill it! Kill it! I swung my hand and tried to slap it away. The camera slipped out of my hand and hit the floor. The bee soared high, then shot back, making a straight line for my face. I swatted at it with both hands. It made an angry buzzing sound and retreated to the window curtains. I turned and saw Sammy pick up the camera. No, I shouted. Drop it. I mean it. Drop it. I saw the bee bounce off the front window. Then it came darting toward my little brother. I swiped the camera out of Sammy's hands, and it flashed. Chapter 17. Sammy grabbed the film as it slid out of the camera. He raised it close to his face to watch it develop. Give me that, I cried. I grabbed for it, but he swung it out of my reach. I had a sick feeling. What have I done to my little brother? The bee flew out the front window. That didn't make me feel any better. Awesome shot, Sammy cried. He laughed. Totally awesome shot of the bee. He handed the photo to me. My hand shook as I raised it to my face. It was a close-up of the bee. Sammy's face was completely hidden behind it. Weird, I muttered. The bee looked gigantic, like something out of a horror movie, and it appeared to be perched on Sammy's shoulders in place of his head. Hey, I cried out as another bright flash made me blink. Oh no. As the explosion of color faded, I saw Sammy holding the camera. Another square of film came sliding out. Did you just take my picture? I stammered. He giggled. It was my turn. You idiot, I cried. He laughed and danced around me. What's your problem, Julie? Let's see how it came out. He pressed next to me as we watched the picture develop. Totally awesome, Sammy declared as it slowly came into focus. At first, I thought I was holding it upside down, but I wasn't. The photo showed me falling head first. Where was I? I squinted hard at the picture. The background was a total blur, but I could see my face so clearly, screaming my head off as I fell. Panic swept over me. No, 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 I shouted. I grabbed the photo and ripped it to tiny shreds. I tossed the shreds to the floor. I grabbed the camera away from my brother. And then I opened my mouth in a shriek of horror. Sammy! His face, it was hidden behind thick, yellow, spiky hair. Bee hair. Two skinny antennae poked up from the top of his furry head. They twitched back and forth. Sammy raised both hands and frantically tore at the wiry hair that covered his face. Sammy, can you talk? I screamed. Can you see me? Can you talk? Bzzz. Chapter 18. The next morning, Mr. Webb called to congratulate me. He said I won the photo contest against David. I would be taking the big yearbook picture from the high diving board. I barely replied. I think I muttered thanks and hung up. I was too worried about Sammy. Mom and Dad had taken him to the hospital. He'd been there all night having tests. Finally, Mom called. What's up? I cried. How is Sammy? The doctors are very puzzled, Mom said. Her voice was hoarse. She sounded very tired. They think maybe Sammy had an allergic reaction to something he ate, Mom said, but Sammy keeps telling them a crazy story about a camera. At least he stopped buzzing, I thought. Guess what, Mom said. Those two girls from your class, Becca and Greta, they're being examined in the next room. Some kind of skin problem, just like in that story you told me. Isn't that weird? I sank to my knees on the floor. I realized I was pressing the phone so hard to my ear. I was giving myself a headache. I took a long, deep breath, but it didn't help. I'll call you when we learn more, Mom said. She clicked off. Of course I knew what Sammy's problem was. Becca and Greta, too. It was the evil camera. But who would believe me? Mom still thought it was a story I made up. I crossed my fingers and prayed the doctors would find a way to help Sammy, Becca, and Greta. The camera was hidden deep in my closet. I'd been awake all night thinking about it. At about 3 a.m, I came up with a plan, a desperate plan to destroy the camera, and to reverse all the evil it had done, and to try to save my own life. It was a crazy hope, but it was the only plan I could think up. I glanced at the clock over the mantel. Time to go to school and shoot the big yearbook photo. You're a winner, Julie, I murmured to myself. I rolled my eyes bitterly. Yeah, for sure, big winner. I pictured the photo Sammy had flashed of me. I could see myself, falling head first, screaming in terror as I fell. I hugged myself to stop shivering. Was that photo about to come true? Would I be falling just like that off the high diving board? Or would my plan save my life? Chapter 19. It was a glowing sunny day, not a cloud in the clear blue sky. A soft wind fluttered the flag in front of my school and made the trees whisper. I made my way around to the new pool next to the soccer field. The building was long and low and white. The sun sparkled like gold in the wide glass doors. A blast of warm air greeted me as I pulled open a door. Loud voices and laughter echoed off the white tile walls. Teachers were already herding their classes into the empty swimming pool. Kids were laughing and goofing on each other, having fun. I sighed. I knew today wasn't a fun day for me. I gazed up at the high diving board. A chill ran down my back. A metal ladder stretched to the blue platform at the top. The rungs were narrow and steep. The platform looked a lot higher than I remembered. I pictured myself falling headfirst from the diving board. I'd pictured it 1,000 times during the night, but now it seemed a lot more real. I stood there, frozen, 2 cameras strapped around my neck. Kids' voices rang out from the pool. Everybody start swimming. Is this a race? Hey, Tanya, did you wear it? Did you wear your string bikini? Don't we need a lifeguard? I let out a cry as someone grabbed my hand. Mr. Webb, hi. Everyone is ready for you, Julie, he said. I just want to say congratulations again on winning the contest. I know you're going to do an excellent job up there. We both raised our eyes to the high board. If he only knew he is sending me up there to my doom. Mr. Webb smiled at me and motioned to the ladder. Then he flashed me a thumbs up. Break a leg? Oh, wow, break a leg. I could break every bone in my body. I turned and walked quickly to the ladder. Some kids in my class shouted to me from the pool. Julie, are you going to dive? I'll catch you. Take my picture now, in case you don't make it to the top. Ha ha. David stepped out from behind the ladder. He had 3 cameras strapped around his neck. He stared at me hard. His face was tight with worry. Julie, are you sure you want me to do this? He asked. I nodded. I told you last night, David. I just discovered I'm totally terrified of heights. But you worked so hard to win our contest, he said. No biggie, I said. I gave him a little push toward the ladder. Go, do it. Take the picture, David. Have fun. I stepped back and watched. David grabbed the railing and began to climb the ladder. Chapter 20. The kids in the pool pointed and shouted as David started to climb. His shoes clanged on the metal rungs of the ladder. Each thud rang in my ears. Mr. Webb came running over to me. He grabbed my shoulder. Julie, what's wrong? He demanded. Why is David doing this instead of you? I sighed. It's a very long story, Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb wanted to ask me more questions, but I turned to watch David. He was halfway to the top, climbing slowly and steadily. David will be safe up there, I told myself. The evil camera didn't take a picture of him falling, so he won't fall. But by staying down on the ground, I hoped I was breaking the camera's spell. That was my big plan. If I didn't go up to the diving board, the photo of me falling could not happen. I was defeating the camera's magic, keeping its prediction from coming true. Kids in the pool grew quiet as David stepped out onto the platform. He leaned against the railing and raised one of his cameras. People, listen to me, people, Mr. Webb shouted. Raise your eyes to David and smile. Don't move. He's up high enough to get you all in. I gazed up at David from the bottom of the ladder. High above me, he steadied himself against the metal rail. Mr. Webb cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted to David, At the count of 3. He turned back to the kids in the pool. Smile, everyone. Smile up to David. This is going to be a classic. Typical. David is always David. He didn't wait for Mr. Webb to count to 3. He stepped out onto the diving board. Then he raised his camera and started clicking away. David dropped to his knees at the edge of the diving board to get closer to the kids. Then he leaned way forward to get the kids in the shallow end into the shot. I realized I had stopped breathing. He isn't going to fall, I told myself. The picture shows me falling, not David. I let my breath out slowly. David changed cameras and clicked a dozen more shots. Then the big show-off stood up on the edge of the diving board. That's a wrap, he shouted down to everyone. Don't clap, just throw money. Kids laughed and groaned and shouted stuff back at him. And then, typical David again, he decided to salute the crowd and take a deep bow. I shut my eyes. I couldn't look. Was he falling? No. When I opened my eyes, he was starting toward the ladder. He saw me and smiled. He gave me a quick wave. Then he made a quick spin to take one more look at the crowd below. And that's when he lost his balance. He's falling, I screamed. Chapter 21. Kids and teachers shrieked in horror. I saw some kids drop to their knees and cover their eyes. The screams were deafening. As he started to drop, David reached out and grabbed the side of the diving board with both hands. Yes, he managed to hold on. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move a muscle. Just stared up at him, hands pressed against my cheeks, watching him dangle from the side of the board. How long could he hold on? Help is on the way, a teacher with a cell phone shouted. Hang on, help is on the way. I realized I had no choice. I stood at the bottom of the ladder. I took a deep breath and grabbed the railings. My legs felt weak and trembling. I ignored them and pulled myself up, rung after rung. I'm coming, I cried. David, hold on. I didn't know if he could hear me over the screams of the kids and teachers below. I pulled myself up another rung, another. I reached the platform. I could see David's fingers gripping the sides of the diving board. I dropped to my hands and knees. Hold on, David. My heart pounded so hard, my chest ached. Crawling, I forced myself out onto the diving board. I leaned over the side and grabbed David's wrists. I gripped them tightly. I've got you, I cried. Swing your legs up. I'm holding you. Swing your legs onto the diving board. David swung his body hard. One foot bumped the board, then dropped back down. I felt a hard jolt, but kept a hold of his wrists. He tried again. This time, one leg sprawled onto the board. I gave a hard tug. Yes, now he had one leg safely on the board. Almost there, David, almost. One more tug. Yes, I did it. I pulled him onto the edge of the board. One more and he'd be safe. One more. I gave another pull, yanking him with all my strength. I pulled so hard I lost my balance. No! A shrill scream escaped my throat as I felt myself start to fall. And the thought flew through my mind, the camera has won. Chapter 22. No. On his stomach on the diving board, David swung his hands out and grabbed me before I could fall. My knees banged the board. I fell face down onto it. Pain shot up my body, but I was safe. We both were safe. We held on to each other, painting hard. Then we carefully stood up and started toward the ladder. David grinned at me. Julie, maybe we should be a team. Yeah, maybe, I agreed. I heard the cheers of the kids down below. They were on their feet, staring up at David and me. They screamed and whistled and clapped happily. I lowered myself slowly to the ground. I saw Mr. Webb and several other teachers running toward me. But I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to know one thing. Did I defeat the evil camera? I ran home, up to my room. I felt dizzy. I felt crazy, dizzy, as if I were floating 2 feet off the ground. My whole body tingled. I left the photos from the camera spread out on my desk. I lurched across the room and grabbed them. Rena's picture was on top. I raised it close and squinted hard at it. No red eye. The red glow had disappeared from the photo. Carla's picture had changed too. It showed her jumping off the floor to shoot a layup. Yes, I cried, pumping a fist in the air. Yes. I dropped her photo and gazed at the one with Becca and Greta. Their skin was normal, not green. And in the last photo, my brother, Sammy, had his normal face. No yellow spiky bee hair covering his face. I did a little dance around my room. I pumped my fists in the air some more. Had I really defeated the camera? I grabbed my cell phone and dialed Mom at the hospital. How is Sammy? I asked. I knew what Mom would say. Sammy is fine. All that weird yellow hair suddenly fell out. Becca and Greta are back to normal too. Your dad and I were bringing Sammy home. I knew it. I knew it. The photo showed me falling headfirst to my death, but I kept it from coming true, and that broke the camera's magic. Because I broke its magic, every horrible thing the camera did was reversed. Now I had one more job. Now I had to destroy the camera so that no one else would ever find it and use it. I thought I knew just how to do it. I cleared all the junk off my dresser and tossed it onto the bed. Then I carefully dug the camera out from its hiding place in my closet. This was my idea. The camera did terrible things to everyone it photographed, so all I had to do was make the camera take a picture of itself, and it would do something terrible to itself. Simple, right? I knew it would work. I set the camera down on my dresser top and pointed the lens at the mirror. I checked the viewfinder. Perfect. The camera was set to take a picture of itself in the mirror. Now I had to make sure I didn't get in the snapshot. I took a metal coat hanger from my closet. I stretched it out until it was almost a straight line. Then I stood way to the side. I leaned way back. No way my reflection was going to show in the mirror. Slowly, carefully, I stretched the hanger toward the camera. And I lowered the end of the hanger, lowered it until it pushed down on the shutter button. Flash. Yes, the camera snapped a photo of itself in the mirror. Would my plan work? Holding my breath, I grabbed the square film from the slot. I held it close to my face and stared at it as it developed. Come on, come on. And then I gasped. Huh? I stared at the picture. Was I seeing double? I looked down and screamed. Oh no! I stared at 2 evil cameras on my dresser, side by side. The end.